The chamber is open and full of whispers.
What if the Sorting Hat had made a different choice on September 1st, 1991? What if, instead of shouting Gryffindor for Hermione Granger, the ancient hat had paused longer, considered deeper, and recognized something the 11-year-old girl herself didn't yet understand? What if it had seen not just her brilliant mind and thirst for knowledge, but also her fierce ambition, her willingness to bend rules when necessary, her cunning approach to achieving her goals? What if the hat had sorted Hermione Granger into Slytherin? This seems impossible at first. Hermione, rule-following, hand-raising, Gryffindor-perfect Hermione, in the house of cunning and ambition? The house that produced Voldemort and most of his Death Eaters? The house known for pure-blood supremacy and disdain for Muggleborns? But consider what the Sorting Hat actually said in canon. It deliberated. It saw Ravenclaw as a possibility. Hermione's intelligence was undeniable. But it also saw something else. Drive. Determination. A girl who'd read every textbook before school started, not just from love of learning but from desperate need to prove herself. A Muggle-born witch entering a world that might reject her, arming herself with knowledge as both shield and weapon. That's not just intelligence. That's ambition. That's cunning. That's Slytherin. Today we're exploring the timeline where the Sorting Hat made that choice, where Hermione Granger walked to the Slytherin table instead of Gryffindor, where the brightest witch of her age spent 7 years learning to navigate a house that didn't want her, proving herself to people who thought her blood made her inferior, and fundamentally changing both Slytherin House and the course of the war against Voldemort. This isn't a story about Hermione becoming dark or evil. Slytherin doesn't equal evil. That's precisely the prejudice this timeline challenges. But it is a story about Hermione becoming harder, sharper, more politically aware, about learning to survive in a hostile environment by being smarter than everyone who underestimates her, about proving that blood status means nothing compared to magical ability and sheer determination. Hermione in Slytherin changes everything. She doesn't become best friends with Harry and Ron on the train. They're in different houses from day one. She doesn't help them with homework in the Gryffindor common room. She doesn't join them on midnight adventures or fight a troll to save them. Instead, she fights different battles. She faces prejudice from her own housemates who call her mudblood and question her right to exist in their sacred house. She learns to play political games with pure-blood children who've been trained in manipulation since birth. She discovers that Slytherin values are about far more than blood purity. They're about ambition, resourcefulness, and the cunning use of any means to achieve your ends. We'll explore how Hermione's presence in Slytherin fundamentally changes the house dynamics, how she forces her housemates to confront their prejudices by being undeniably better than them at magic, how she forms unlikely alliances with students who respect power and ability more than blood, how she becomes a different kind of heroine, not the loyal Gryffindor sidekick, but a Slytherin operator who plays the long game. We'll watch how this changes Harry and Ron's stories. Without Hermione as their friend, they struggle academically and make different choices. They don't have her strategic thinking or extensive research skills. They face challenges differently, often more recklessly, sometimes with worse consequences. We'll examine how Hermione's Slytherin education shapes her approach to fighting Voldemort. She learns to think like Death Eaters, to understand their tactics and psychology. She becomes invaluable to the Order of the Phoenix, precisely because she can predict how dark wizards will act. She fights the war not with Gryffindor courage, but with Slytherin cunning, and will explore the moral complexity this creates. Hermione in Slytherin has to make harder choices, has to decide when to compromise her principles to survive, has to navigate the line between using dark magic for good purposes and becoming what she fights against, has to prove constantly that a Muggle-born can be Slytherin without being a blood traitor to her own identity. This timeline isn't easier for Hermione, it's brutally harder. She faces hostility from her own house and suspicion from others who can't understand why a Muggle-born would be sorted into Slytherin. She's isolated in ways canon Hermione never was. She doesn't have the easy friendship and acceptance that Gryffindor offered. But she also becomes more formidable, more dangerous, more capable of the kind of strategic thinking that wins wars rather than just battles. She proves that Slytherin House can produce heroes, and that ambition applied to righteous goals can change the world. So let's explore what happens when the brightest witch of her age is sorted into the House of the Cunning. When Hermione Granger becomes a Slytherin. When blood prejudice meets intellectual superiority and loses the sorting. September 1st, 1991. The Hogwarts Express had barely left King's Cross when Hermione Granger made her first mistake. She'd entered a compartment where a red-haired boy was attempting to turn his rat yellow with what was obviously not a real spell. Instead of being diplomatic, instead of introducing herself politely, she'd lectured. "That's not a real spell, is it? It's not very good. I've tried a few simple ones myself and they've all worked for me. I've learned all our course books by heart, of course. I just hope it will be enough." The boy, Ron Weasley, she'd learn later, had stared at her with something between annoyance and disbelief. The dark-haired boy beside him, the one with the distinctive lightning bolt scar that marked him as Harry Potter, had looked uncomfortable. "Are you really Harry Potter?" she'd continued, unable to help herself. The boy who lived, right there in her compartment. "I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. You two better change into your robes. I expect we'll be arriving soon." She'd left feeling pleased with herself. She'd met Harry Potter. She'd been helpful. Surely they'd remember her. She didn't realize she'd just demonstrated exactly the traits that would lead to her sorting. The Great Hall was everything the books had promised. Enchanted ceiling, showing the night sky, floating candles, 4 long house tables filled with students. Hermione stood with the other first years, heart hammering with a mixture of excitement and terror. The Sorting Hat song mentioned the 4 houses and their qualities. Gryffindor for the brave, Ravenclaw for the clever, Hufflepuff for the loyal and hard-working, Slytherin for the cunning and ambitious. Hermione knew she was clever. Ravenclaw seemed obvious. Perhaps Gryffindor. She'd been brave enough to practice magic despite being Muggle-born, brave enough to enter a world that was completely foreign. Names were called. Abbott, Hannah, became a Hufflepuff. Boot, Terry, went to Ravenclaw. Granger, Hermione. She walked to the stool on legs that trembled slightly. The entire school was watching. She was Muggle-born, she reminded herself. She had to prove she belonged here, had to show them that blood didn't matter, that magic was what counted. The hat settled over her eyes. "Well, well, well," a voice said in her mind. "What have we here?" "Oh, yes, I see. Muggle-born. But don't let that fool anyone. You've prepared for this, haven't you? Read every book, memorized every spell. Not just for learning, oh no. You need to prove yourself. Need to show them you're better than they think." "I want to learn," Hermione thought desperately. "I love magic. I love learning." Yes, yes, Barry Ravenclaw. That brilliant mind would flourish there. "But there's more to you than just intelligence, isn't there? I see ambition. Not for power, perhaps, but for recognition. For respect. You want to be the best, not just good. You want them to acknowledge that you belong here. That's just wanting to succeed," Hermione argued. "No. That's ambition. And I see how your mind works, clever girl. You've already identified which students will be influential, which professors to impress. You're planning your path through Hogwarts like a chess match. That's not Ravenclaw's love of learning for its own sake. That's Slytherin cunning." Not Slytherin, Hermione thought, suddenly frightened. They hate Muggle-borns. They produced Voldemort. "I can't. Slytherin doesn't produce dark wizards, child. It produces ambitious ones. What they do with that ambition is their choice. You could be extraordinary in Slytherin. Force them to confront their prejudices. Prove that blood means nothing compared to ability. They'll hate me. They'll underestimate you. And you'll use that. You're already thinking about it, aren't you? How you could turn their prejudice into advantage. How you could prove yourself in ways that would be impossible in any other house. That's Slytherin thinking." Hermione's mind raced. The hat was right. She was already strategizing. If she went to Slytherin, she'd face hostility. But she'd also force them to acknowledge her abilities. Every time she beat them in class, every time she performed magic they couldn't match, she'd be proving that blood purity was a lie. And didn't the wizarding world need that proof? Didn't Slytherin House need someone to challenge their prejudices from within? "You're sure about this?" Hermione asked. "I'm never wrong," the hat said, almost smugly. "You're ambitious, clever, and cunning enough to survive. You'll be remarkable." Slytherin, the word echoed through the great hall. Silence fell like a physical weight. Hermione opened her eyes to see shocked faces at every table. At the staff table, Professor McGonagall looked surprised. Dumbledore was watching her with keen interest. At the Slytherin table, not a single person was clapping. She walked toward them, chin held high despite her hammering heart. This was it. No turning back now. A blond boy with a pointed face and cold gray eyes was staring at her with undisguised disgust. Draco Malfoy. She recognized him from the train. Several other students were whispering to each other, shooting her hostile looks. She sat down at the end of the table, as far from everyone else as possible. A girl with dark hair pulled back severely was sitting nearest to her, looking at Hermione like she'd just sat down in something disgusting. Mudblood, the girl said quietly, making sure only Hermione could hear. In Slytherin, this is an outrage. Hermione had read about that word in her research, a slur for Muggleborns, implying dirty blood. She'd known she might face this, but hearing it directed at her still made her chest tight. My name is Hermione Granger, she said clearly, refusing to show how the word hurt. And the Sorting Hat put me here, so I belong here just as much as you do. The hat made a mistake, the girl said. The Sorting Hat doesn't make mistakes, Hermione replied, remembering reading that in Hogwarts, a history. It's never been wrong in over 1,000 years. The girl looked like she wanted to argue, but couldn't counter the logic. She turned away dismissively. More names were called. Longbottom Neville became a Gryffindor, after the longest sorting Hermione had seen. Malfoy Draco was sorted into Slytherin before the hat even touched his head. He swaggered to the table, looking supremely pleased with himself. Potter Harry? The whispers exploded. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, was being sorted. Hermione watched as the hat deliberated for nearly 4 minutes before finally shouting, Gryffindor! The Gryffindor table erupted in cheers. Harry walked to them looking relieved. He caught Hermione's eye for just a second as he passed, and she saw recognition, the girl from the train, and then confusion as he realized she was at the Slytherin table. Weasley Ronald was sorted quickly to Gryffindor. He joined Harry with a wide grin, not even glancing at the Slytherin table. The feast appeared, and Hermione tried to eat despite having no appetite. Students around her were talking among themselves, deliberately excluding her. She caught snippets of conversation. Talk of pure-blood families, of summer holidays at magical estates, of parents who'd been Death Eaters, and the unfairness of their imprisonment. First mudblood Slytherin in decades, someone muttered behind her. It's shameful. The hat must be broken, another voice agreed. Hermione focused on her plate and planned. She was here now. She'd prove she belonged. She'd be so good at magic that they'd have to acknowledge her. She'd show them that blood meant nothing. She was a Slytherin now. Time to start thinking like one. After the feast, a tall boy with a prefect badge led the first-year Slytherins down to the dungeons. The common room was beneath the lake, with greenish light filtering through the windows and a cold, damp atmosphere that made Hermione shiver. Girls' dormitories to the left, boys to the right, the prefect announced. Common room rules. No interfering with other students' belongings, no destroying house property, and no bringing shame on Slytherin House. We value cunning, ambition, and resourcefulness. We also value pure-blood heritage and proper wizarding behavior. He looked directly at Hermione when he said this last part. She found the first-year girls' dormitory and discovered she was sharing with 3 others, Pansy Parkinson, Millicent Bulstrode, and Daphne Greengrass. All 3 were pure-bloods from old magical families. All 3 looked at her with varying degrees of hostility and disdain. I'm not sharing a room with a mudblood, Pansy said immediately. The sleeping arrangements aren't up to you, Hermione replied, keeping her voice level. I'm here. I'm a Slytherin. Get used to it. We'll see how long that lasts, Millicent said darkly. Hermione unpacked her trunk in silence while the other girls whispered among themselves. She'd brought all her textbooks, several reference volumes she'd bought in Diagon Alley, and even a few Muggle books for comfort. Looking at them now, she realized bringing Muggle books to a Slytherin dormitory might have been a mistake. Sure enough, Pansy noticed. What are those? She demanded, pointing at Pride and Prejudice. Books, Hermione said shortly. Muggle books. In our dormitory. My books. In my space. It's not your space. It's Slytherin space, and you're polluting it with Muggle filth. Hermione took a deep breath, fighting down anger. She couldn't afford to lose her temper on the first night. She needed to be smart about this. These books are mine, she said carefully. They're staying with my belongings. If you touch them, I'll report you to Professor Snape for theft. I believe Slytherins value personal property rights. It was a gamble, but it worked. Pansy's eyes narrowed, but she didn't push further. Slytherins did value ownership and the rules that protected it, even when they hated who owned something. That night, lying in a 4-poster bed with green silk hangings, Hermione heard whispers from the other beds. They were talking about her, making plans to make her life miserable, discussing how to get her transferred to another house or expelled entirely. She stared at the stone ceiling and reminded herself why she was here. The Sorting Hat had seen something in her. Ambition, cunning, the ability to survive this. She would prove it right. She was Hermione Granger, Muggle-born Slytherin, and she was going to show them all exactly what that meant. First year, survival and strategy classes started the next morning, and Hermione quickly learned that being a Slytherin changed everything about the Hogwarts experience. In Transfiguration, Professor McGonagall paired students from different houses. Hermione ended up working with a Hufflepuff girl named Susan Bones, who looked nervous but not hostile. "I'm Hermione," she offered. "Susan," the girl replied carefully. "You're the Slytherin." "I'm a Slytherin, yes. Sorry, I just meant everyone's talking about it. A Muggle born in Slytherin. The hat sorted me there," Hermione said firmly. "I belong there." McGonagall's lecture on turning matches into needles was fascinating. Hermione took meticulous notes, raising her hand for every question. She noticed McGonagall's slight surprise each time. Was the professor expecting less from a Slytherin? Or from a Muggle-born? When they practiced the spell, Hermione achieved a perfect silver needle on her third attempt. Only one other student managed it, Harry Potter, at the Gryffindor table, who looked just as surprised as she felt. "Excellent work, Miss Granger," McGonagall said, examining her needle. 5 points to Slytherin." The praise felt hollow. She'd earned points for her house, but she knew the other Slytherins wouldn't appreciate them coming from her. Charms was different. Professor Flitwick was delighted by Hermione's enthusiasm and perfect execution of the levitation charm. But when she earned another 5 points for Slytherin, Draco Malfoy made a show of rolling his eyes. "Trying to buy our acceptance, Granger?" he drawled after class. "Earning points won't make you one of us." "I don't want to buy anything," Hermione replied coldly. "I want to learn magic. If that earns points, so be it." "Mudblood points don't count," Pansy added, appearing beside Draco. "We'll just lose them through your incompetence eventually." Hermione ignored them and headed to her next class. She was learning quickly that responding to every insult was exhausting and pointless. Better to save her energy for things that mattered. The real test came with potions. Professor Snape swept into the dungeon classroom in billowing black robes, immediately commanding attention. He gave a speech about the subtle art of potion making, his dark eyes scanning the students. When he reached Hermione, he paused. "Our first Muggle-born Slytherin in recent memory. Tell me, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Hermione's heart leaped. She knew this. She'd read ahead in the textbook. "The draught of living death, sir." "A powerful sleeping potion." Snape's eyebrow raised slightly. "Correct. And where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar?" "In the stomach of a goat, sir. It's a stone that can cure most poisons." "What is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane?" "They're the same plant, sir. Also called aconite." Snape stared at her for a long moment. Then, "It appears you've actually read your textbook, Miss Granger. 5 points to Slytherin for adequate preparation." It was grudging praise at best, but it was more than he'd given anyone else. Hermione felt a small surge of satisfaction. The satisfaction died when she returned to the Slytherin common room that evening. A group of older students were waiting, led by a 6th-year boy with a cruel smile. "Granger," he said. "I'm Marcus Flint, 6th year. We need to have a conversation about house loyalty." Hermione's stomach clenched. "What about it?" "You're earning points for Slytherin," Flint said. "That's good, but you're also a mudblood in our house, which is bad. So here's how this works. You earn points, you keep your head down, you don't embarrass us, and we don't make your life more miserable than it already is. Try to act like you fit in, stop showing off in class, and maybe we'll tolerate your presence." "I'm not showing off," Hermione protested. "I'm answering questions. Learning." "You're making purebloods look bad by being better at magic than them," another older student said. "That's a problem." "Then maybe pureblood should study harder," Hermione shot back before she could stop herself. The common room went silent. Flint's expression darkened. "Careful, mudblood. You're in our house. That means you follow our rules." "The only rules I follow are Hogwarts rules and Professor Snape's rules," Hermione said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Neither of those say I can't answer questions in class." "You really want to make enemies on your first day?" Flint asked softly. I don't want enemies at all. I want to learn magic and earn my place here. If that makes me enemies, that's your problem, not mine. It was bold. Probably too bold. But Hermione had learned from her reading that Slytherins respected strength, not weakness. Backing down now would mark her as an easy target. Flint studied her for a moment. Then he laughed, not a kind laugh, but not entirely hostile either. You've got nerve, Granger. That's Slytherin at least. Fine. Keep answering your questions. But don't expect us to celebrate your success. He walked away, and the other students dispersed. Hermione released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. That was stupid, a voice said beside her. Hermione turned to find a tall girl with dark hair and sharp features watching her. She was older, 3rd or 4th year, Hermione guessed. Challenging Flint like that, the girl continued. Stupid and brave. I'm Gemma Farley, 4th year. Prefect. Hermione Granger, Hermione said unnecessarily. I know who you are. Everyone knows who you are. The mudblood Slytherin? Gemma's tone wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. Look, you're going to have a hard time here. Most of these students have been raised to believe blood purity is everything. You being here, being good at magic, it threatens their entire worldview. I can't change who I am, Hermione said. I'm not asking you to. I'm warning you that you need to be smarter about how you operate. You can't fight everyone all the time. Pick your battles. Make allies where you can. And for Merlin's sake, don't antagonize the older students. You're talking to me, Hermione pointed out. Helping me, even. I'm ambitious, not stupid, Gemma said. You're brilliant. Snape doesn't compliment first years. That means you might be useful someday. I'm investing in future potential. It was the most Slytherin thing Hermione had heard yet. But also, paradoxically, the most helpful. Thank you, Hermione said carefully. Don't thank me. Just survive. And Granger? That thing you said about Slytherin studying harder, that was perfect. Insulting while technically correct. Keep that up and you might actually make it here. Gemma walked away, leaving Hermione standing alone in the common room. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Hermione excelled in every class, earning points for Slytherin and resentment from her housemates. She spent breaks in the library, where she could escape the hostile common room and actually study in peace. She observed Harry Potter and Ron Weasley from a distance. They'd become friends quickly, joining the Gryffindors in their easy camaraderie. They laughed together, ate together, looked relaxed in a way Hermione envied. She was always alone, always on guard, always proving herself. In late October, she overheard Draco Malfoy talking to Pansy in the common room. The mudblood thinks she's better than us, Draco was saying. Just because she can turn a match into a needle and brew a simple potion. My father says it's an outrage that she's in our house. Someone should teach her a lesson, Pansy replied. Show her what happens to mudbloods who get above their station. Hermione's hands clenched into fists, but she said nothing, did nothing. Reacting would only make things worse. The next day, in Defense Against the Dark Arts, Professor Quirrell assigned them to practice basic defensive shields. Hermione partnered with Theodore Nott, a quiet, pure-blood boy who generally ignored her rather than actively bullying her. Shields up, Quirrell stuttered. Practice the spell. Hermione cast her shield perfectly. Theodore's was weaker, flickering at the edges. Your stance is wrong, Hermione said quietly. Feet shoulder-width apart, wand at a 45-degree angle. Like this. She demonstrated. Theodore watched, then adjusted his position. His next shield was noticeably stronger. Thanks, he muttered, surprised. You're welcome. It was a small moment, but it mattered. Theodore Nott wasn't friendly after that, but he wasn't hostile either. He nodded to her in the corridors sometimes. Didn't join in when others called her mudblood. One ally. Small, uncertain, but real. Hermione catalogued it carefully in her mind. This was how she'd survive Slytherin. Not through confrontation, but through strategic relationship building, proving her worth, one interaction at a time. Halloween brought the troll incident, but it unfolded differently without Hermione and Gryffindor. She was at the Slytherin table when Quirrell burst into the Great Hall screaming about a troll in the dungeons. The Slytherin common room was in the dungeons. Panic erupted. Professor Snape immediately took charge, directing prefects to evacuate Slytherin students to a safe location. Hermione followed the crowd, her mind racing. A troll in the dungeons meant something had gone seriously wrong. Trolls didn't just wander into Hogwarts. Later she heard about Harry and Ron saving Hermione. No, saving a different girl. Saving someone from Gryffindor? No, that didn't make sense in this timeline. She pieced together the story from overheard conversations. Harry and Ron had fought a troll in the girls' bathroom to save a Gryffindor first-year named Lavender Brown who'd been crying there after overhearing cruel comments. They'd knocked it out with its own club and were being hailed as heroes. Hermione felt a strange pang. In another life, maybe that could have been her they'd saved. Maybe she'd have become friends with them, joined their adventures. But she was Slytherin now. She had her own path. In November, first-year flying lessons began. Hermione was nervous. She'd read about flying but never actually done it. The Slytherin first years assembled on the grounds with the Gryffindors. "Mount your brooms," Madame Hooch instructed. Hermione's broom rose to her hand jerkily. Across from her, Harry's broom jumped to his hand immediately. Natural talent, obviously. When Neville Longbottom's broom rocketed into the air with him clinging desperately, Hermione watched in horror as he fell and broke his wrist. Hooch took him to the hospital wing with strict orders that no one fly while she was gone. Draco Malfoy immediately grabbed the Remembrall Neville had dropped. "Look at this," Draco laughed, mounting his broom. Maybe if Longbottom had this, he'd remember to keep his fat arse on the ground. Harry confronted him. "Come get it, Potter." What followed was impressive. Flying from both boys, Draco taunting, Harry pursuing, both showing natural talent. When Harry caught the Remembrall in a spectacular dive, Professor McGonagall appeared and whisked him away. Later Hermione heard he'd been made Gryffindor Seeker, despite being a first year. More evidence of his special treatment, the Slytherins said. More proof that Dumbledore favored Gryffindor. Hermione said nothing, but privately she thought the complaints were sour grapes. Harry had talent. He'd earned his position. That thought, defending a Gryffindor in her own mind, made her realize something important. Just because she was Slytherin didn't mean she had to adopt all their prejudices. She could be cunning and ambitious while still being fair. That was her path forward. Not trying to fit Slytherin's mold, but creating her own version of what a Slytherin could be. December brought Christmas. Most students went home for the holidays. Hermione stayed at Hogwarts. The idea of explaining Slytherin House to her Muggle parents seemed impossible. Christmas morning brought a surprise. Presents. Her parents had sent a package of books and sweets. But there was also an unmarked package containing a beautiful new quill set and a note. For a fellow student who values academic excellence. Keep proving them wrong. No signature. But Hermione suspected Gemma Farley, the fourth-year prefect who'd given her survival advice. She spent Christmas reading in the library, peaceful in a way she hadn't been since arriving at Hogwarts. The castle was nearly empty. No one was there to call her mudblood or question her right to exist. On Boxing Day, she encountered Harry Potter in the library. He was researching something, surrounded by books. "Hello," Hermione said, surprising herself. Harry looked up, startled. "Oh, hi." "From the train?" "Yes." "And you're Harry Potter?" "Yeah." He looked uncomfortable with the fame, she noticed. "What are you researching?" Harry hesitated. Then, Nicholas Flamel. Heard the name somewhere. Trying to figure out who he is. Hermione's mind immediately began cataloging possibilities. Nicholas Flamel. She'd seen that name somewhere in her reading. "The alchemist," she said suddenly. "Created the Philosopher's Stone. Granted immortality through the elixir of life." Harry's eyes widened. "That's it. Thank you. Why are you researching him?" Harry glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Can I trust you?" It was a strange question. They barely knew each other. They were in different houses. Houses that were traditionally rivals. But Hermione saw an opportunity. An alliance with Harry Potter could be valuable. And more than that, she was curious. "Yes," she said simply. Harry explained about the three-headed dog guarding something on the third floor, about Snape's suspicious behavior, about believing something was being hidden at Hogwarts that Flamel had created. "You think the Philosopher's Stone is here," Hermione said, "and someone's trying to steal it." "Maybe. I don't know. But something's going on." Hermione's strategic mind whirred. This was dangerous, but also important. And if Harry was right, helping protect the stone could prove her loyalty to the school despite being Slytherin. "I'll help you research," she offered, discreetly. "Why?" Harry asked suspiciously. "You're Slytherin?" "I'm Slytherin," Hermione agreed. "But I'm also someone who cares about stopping dark wizards." "Slytherin doesn't mean evil, Harry. It means ambitious." My ambition is proving that blood status doesn't matter. Helping stop a thief serves that goal. Harry studied her for a moment, then he smiled slightly. Okay. Thanks, Hermione. It was the first real smile anyone had directed at her since her sorting. Hermione returned to the Slytherin common room that night feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Hopeful. She was making her own path, building her own alliances, proving that a Muggle-born Slytherin could be valuable, could be trusted, could be powerful. And when danger came, because it would come, Hermione was certain of that, she'd be ready to prove exactly what she was capable of. The stone plot developed throughout the winter term. Hermione met with Harry and Ron, reluctantly accepted by Ron after Harry vouched for her, in secret corners of the library. The Gryffindor boys were suspicious at first, especially Ron, who couldn't understand why a Slytherin would help them. She could be spying for Snape, Ron muttered during their second meeting. If I were spying for Professor Snape, I'd hardly be researching how to stop a theft he's supposedly committing, Hermione pointed out logically. Maybe that's what you want us to think. Ron, think about it. I'm Muggle-born in Slytherin House. I'm already fighting an uphill battle for basic acceptance. Why would I risk that by betraying my head of house unless I genuinely believed he was doing something wrong? Ron didn't have a good answer to that. He remained wary, but he stopped openly accusing her of treachery. Their research revealed that the stone was protected by multiple enchantments created by different professors. Hermione contributed crucial insights. She recognized Snape's potions challenge from her advanced reading, identified that Fluffy the three-headed dog could be lulled to sleep with music, deduced that Sprout's devil's snare would release them if they stayed calm. How do you know all this? Harry asked, impressed despite himself. I read, Hermione said simply. Everything I can find. Knowledge is power, especially when you're fighting to prove you belong somewhere. Late one night in March, Hermione returned to the Slytherin common room to find Draco Malfoy holding court near the fireplace. My father says the Mudblood's been spending time with Potter and Weasley, Draco announced, clearly for her benefit. Consorting with blood traitors and half-bloods. Very appropriate company for her kind. Hermione paused in the doorway. Every eye in the common room was on her. She could ignore it. That was usually her strategy. But something about Draco's smug expression made her reconsider. Slytherins respected power. Maybe it was time to demonstrate some. My research partnerships are my own business, Malfoy, Hermione said clearly, unless you'd like to compare our transfiguration marks. I notice you barely managed an acceptable on the last essay while I received an outstanding. Draco's face flushed. Marks don't matter. Of course they do. They're quantifiable proof of magical ability. Or would you prefer to demonstrate practically? I'm happy to duel if you think your pure blood makes your magic stronger than mine. The common room went very quiet. Challenging another student to a duel was serious business. Draco looked uncertain. He was a decent student, but not exceptional, and Hermione's grades were the highest in their year. If they dueled and he lost to a Muggle-born, I don't duel with mudbloods, Draco said finally, trying to sound superior. It would be beneath me. How convenient, Hermione replied. Hiding behind your blood status when your actual magical ability is in question. Very brave, Draco. Very Slytherin. She walked past him to the girls' dormitories, heart pounding but head held high. The next morning Theodore Nott approached her at breakfast. That was well played, he said quietly. Challenging him to prove his superiority. He couldn't accept without risking public defeat, couldn't refuse without looking cowardly. I'm tired of being called mudblood without consequences, Hermione said. Most people would have hexed him. Hexing him would have gotten me in trouble. Exposing his hypocrisy just made him look foolish. She paused. That's Slytherin, isn't it? Using cunning instead of direct confrontation? Theodore almost smiled. Yes, that's exactly Slytherin. It was validation from an unexpected source. Hermione filed it away carefully. In May, everything came to a head. Harry overheard Quirrell being threatened by Snape. At least, that's what Harry believed. In reality, as Hermione would later learn, Snape had been trying to stop Quirrell from stealing the stone. Harry was convinced that Snape would make his move that night. He told Hermione and Ron his suspicions during their library meeting. We have to stop him, Harry said. We have to get to the stone first. This is mad, Ron said. We're first years, we should tell Dumbledore. Dumbledore's gone to London. McGonagall won't believe us. Hermione's strategic mind analyzed the situation rapidly. Harry was probably wrong about Snape being the thief. She'd been watching their head of house carefully, and he seemed more concerned about protecting the stone than stealing it. But someone was clearly after it, and if Harry was right about the attempt happening tonight, "I'll help," Hermione said. "But we need a plan beyond just rushing in." They made their plans. That night, after curfew, Hermione slipped out of the Slytherin dormitories. Getting past the fat lady to meet Harry and Ron in Gryffindor Tower would be impossible, so they'd arranged to meet near the third-floor corridor. Harry and Ron were already there, with Neville Longbottom who'd tried to stop them and gotten tangled in the operation. "You came," Harry said, sounding relieved. "I said I would." Hermione pulled out her wand. "Ready?" They made it past Fluffy. Ron's attempt at playing the flute was terrible, but it worked. They dropped through the trap door onto the devil's snare. "Stop moving," Hermione ordered as the plant began to tighten. "It constricts when you struggle. Relax." Ron and Neville panicked. Harry managed to calm himself. Hermione cast Lumos Solem. The light and heat made the devil's snare recoil, releasing them all. The flying keys were easy for Harry with his seeker skills. The chess set was harder. Ron had to sacrifice himself to let Harry continue. Hermione stayed with Ron and Neville, who'd been knocked out by a rogue chess piece, while Harry went forward alone. "He'll be killed," Ron mumbled, half-conscious. "He's braver than any Gryffindor I know," Hermione said. "He'll survive." She was proven right. Harry returned with the stone, having defeated not Snape but Quirrell, possessed by Voldemort's spirit. He'd stopped the Dark Lord's return through sheer determination and his mother's protective magic. When Dumbledore questioned them in the hospital wing, he looked at Hermione with particular interest. "Miss Granger, a Slytherin helping to protect the stone from theft. That shows considerable courage and character." "It shows self-interest," Hermione corrected carefully. "If Voldemort returned, Muggleborns like me would be his first targets. Stopping his return serves my survival." "That's very Slytherin reasoning, sir." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "Indeed. 20 points to Slytherin for strategic thinking in service of the greater good." The points meant nothing in terms of the House Cup. Gryffindor won easily, but they meant everything to Hermione. Public acknowledgement from Dumbledore that a Slytherin, a Muggle-born Slytherin, had helped save the school. The next morning whispers followed her through the Great Hall. "Did you hear? Granger helped Potter stop you-know-who. A Slytherin fighting against the Dark Lord. That's not right. Maybe she's not as bad as we thought. She's still a mudblood." But there were other whispers too. Quieter, but more significant. "She's brilliant, though. Even Snape says so. And she did help stop a theft. That's loyal to Hogwarts." Maybe the hat knew what it was doing. In the Slytherin common room, reactions were mixed. Draco was furious that she'd helped Potter. Pansy called her a traitor to her house. But others, Theodore Nott, Daphne Greengrass, even some of the older students, looked at her with something that might have been respect. "You've made things complicated for yourself," Gemma Farley told her. "Half the house thinks you're a blood traitor. The other half thinks you're interesting." "Which half are you in?" Hermione asked. "The half that thinks you're going to be someone significant someday," Gemma said. "And that being your ally now might prove valuable later." Very Slytherin thinking, Granger. On the train home, Hermione sat in a compartment with Theodore Nott and Daphne Greengrass. Not friends exactly, but no longer enemies either. Through the window, she saw Harry and Ron laughing with other Gryffindors. She felt a pang of what might have been. In another life she'd have been with them. Would have had that easy friendship and belonging. But she was Slytherin now. Her path was harder, lonelier, more complicated. But also, she was beginning to realize, more nuanced. She was learning things about power and politics and strategy that Gryffindor would never have taught her. "Same compartment next year?" Daphne asked, surprising Hermione. "If you want," Hermione said carefully. "You're odd for a Slytherin," Daphne said. "But you're brilliant at magic, and you helped save the school. That's worth something." It was the closest thing to friendship Hermione had received from a housemate all year. She'd survived her first year. She'd proven herself capable. She'd made tentative allies and earned grudging respect from some quarters. Next year would bring new challenges, but Hermione Granger, Slytherin, was ready for them. Second year, the Chamber of Secrets summer. With her parents was strange. They asked excited questions about Hogwarts. What were her classes like? Had she made friends? Was magic as wonderful as the books suggested? Hermione answered carefully, editing out the parts about constant bullying and being called mudblood and living in a house where half the students wished she didn't exist. "I'm learning a lot," she said. "The professors are excellent. The library is amazing." "And friends?" her mother pressed. "Have you made any friends?" Hermione thought of Theodore and Daphne, of her complicated alliance with Harry Potter, of Gemma Farley's pragmatic mentorship. "Some," she said. "It's complicated." "House rivalries?" her father guessed. He'd read Hogwarts, a history too, trying to understand his daughter's new world. Something like that. She spent the summer reading every book she could find about pure-blood culture and wizarding politics. If she was going to survive in Slytherin, she needed to understand how these families thought, what they valued, what motivated them. She also read about the Chamber of Secrets, a legendary chamber built by Salazar Slytherin, supposedly containing a monster that would purge Hogwarts of Muggleborns. The book she found was old and dramatic, clearly exaggerating for effect, but the core idea disturbed her. Slytherin himself had hated Muggleborns enough to create a weapon against them. And she'd been sorted into his house. September 1st found her on platform 9 3/4, dreading the return to Hogwarts. The summer reprieve from constant vigilance had been nice. Going back to being the mudblood Slytherin felt like returning to a battlefield. On the train, she shared a compartment with Theodore and Daphne again. Also joining them was Blaise Zabini, a quiet boy who'd mostly ignored Hermione first year. "Heard you helped Potter stop a thief last year," Blaise said, studying her. "Interesting choice for a Slytherin." "Stopping someone from reviving the Dark Lord served my interests," Hermione replied, using the same logic she'd given Dumbledore. "Slytherins are meant to be self-interested. I was acting to protect myself." "Clever rationalization," Blaise said. "But we all know you did it because it was right, not just because it served you. Does it matter? The result was the same." "It matters," Daphne interjected. "Because motives tell us who you really are. You can justify it with Slytherin logic all you want, Granger, but you helped save the school because you're decent. That's not very Slytherin." "Maybe Slytherin needs more decent people," Hermione said. The compartment fell silent. It was a radical statement, that Slytherin House itself needed to change, not just accept her presence. "You're either very brave or very stupid," Theodore said finally. "Why not both?" Hermione replied. Back at Hogwarts, the sorting occurred. New first years, looking terrified. Hermione watched, remembering her own sorting. The moment the hat had said Slytherin, and her entire trajectory had changed. The feast was interrupted by a new professor, Gilderoy Lockhart, all teeth and hair and books about his supposed heroic adventures. He was teaching defense against the dark arts, and within 5 minutes of meeting him, Hermione could tell he was a fraud. She'd read his books critically over the summer, and the writing was terrible, full of logical inconsistencies and implausible scenarios. No one could have actually done all the things Lockhart claimed. "What do you think of him?" she asked Theodore as they walked to the dungeons after the feast. "He's an idiot," Theodore said bluntly, "but a useful idiot. If the defense position is cursed like people say, better it claims him than someone competent." Hermione filed that away. The defense against the dark arts position was allegedly cursed. She'd have to research that. Classes began smoothly. Hermione was even more advanced than last year, having studied extensively over the summer. She earned points for Slytherin in every class, and while some housemates still resented her, others were beginning to accept that having the smartest student in their year was actually useful for house rankings. Then, in October, the attacks began. Mrs. Did Brilliant, Norris Filch's cat, was found petrified. On the wall, written in blood, "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." Hermione's blood ran cold reading those words. The Chamber of Secrets. She'd read about it. Salazar Slytherin's weapon against Muggleborns. And now it had been opened. She was, very clearly, an enemy of the air. The school erupted in gossip and fear. Slytherins were gleeful, talking about how the air would purge the school of mudbloods and half-bloods. Muggleborns were terrified. The other houses looked at Slytherins with suspicion and anger. Hermione sat in the common room that night, listening to her housemates celebrate, and felt sick. "Finally," Pansy was saying, "the air will restore Slytherin's vision. Pure bloods only. The way it should be." "Think who it could be," Draco added. "Someone pureblood, obviously. Someone powerful. Someone worthy of Slytherin's legacy." Their eyes drifted to Hermione. She kept her expression neutral, but internally she was calculating escape routes, defensive spells, ways to protect herself if the attacks escalated. "You're very quiet, Granger," Draco said, approaching her. "Scared?" "Should I be?" Hermione asked evenly. "You're Muggle-born, an enemy of the air. I'd be terrified if I were you. Fortunately, terror doesn't accomplish anything useful. Preparation does." She left the common room and headed to the library, mind racing. She needed to research the chamber, its location, the monster it contained, how to defend against it. She needed to be ready. In the library, she encountered Harry and Ron again. "Hermione," Harry said, surprised. "Are you okay?" "The chamber." "I'm fine," she said curtly. "I need to research the Chamber of Secrets. Want to help?" They researched together, pooling knowledge. Hermione found references to a monster that could kill with a look, to Salazar Slytherin's heir being the only one who could open the chamber, to Parseltongue being required. The attacks continued. Colin Creevey was petrified, then Justin Finch-Fletchley and nearly headless Nick. The school descended into panic. Muggle-borns started traveling in groups, never alone. Some withdrew from school entirely, their parents too frightened to risk their safety. Hermione refused to be driven out. This was her school too. The chamber didn't change that. But the pressure in Slytherin House increased dramatically. Students openly discussed which Muggle-borns would be attacked next. They made bets on when Hermione would be found petrified. "You should leave," Gemma Farley told her bluntly. "Go home. It's not safe for you here." "Leaving would be admitting they've won," Hermione said. "That Slytherin House belongs only to pure bloods. I won't give them that satisfaction. Your pride might get you killed." "My pride is all I have. Without it, I'm just another Muggle-born being pushed out of the magical world. With it, I'm Hermione Granger, Slytherin, who refuses to be intimidated." In early December, a dueling club was started by Lockhart, ostensibly to teach students to defend themselves. Hermione attended, knowing she needed any defensive training she could get. The first meeting was a disaster. Lockhart was useless. Snape stepped in to demonstrate proper dueling technique. Then students were paired off to practice. Hermione was paired with Millicent Bulstrode, her housemate who'd hated her since day one. "Try not to embarrass yourself, Mudblood," Millicent muttered. They bowed. Millicent immediately cast Rictus Empra, a tickling charm that could incapacitate. Hermione blocked it with Protego and countered with Expelliarmus. Millicent's wand flew from her hand. The watching students murmured in surprise. "Lucky shot," Millicent growled, retrieving her wand. They went again. This time Millicent tried Tarantellegra, the dancing feet spell. Hermione dodged. "Cast Petrificus Totalis." Millicent's body went rigid, and she toppled over. Snape reversed the spell, looking at Hermione with an unreadable expression. "Well done, Miss Granger. 10 points to Slytherin for excellent defensive reflexes. It should have been a victory. Instead, it made things worse." Hermione had publicly humiliated a pure-blood Slytherin. Millicent's friends rallied around her, and the hostility intensified. That night, Hermione found her belongings destroyed. Books torn apart, clothes shredded, everything she owned ruined. A note on her bed read, "MUD bloods aren't welcome." She stood in the wreckage of her possessions and felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear, not sadness. Determination. She went to Professor Snape's office and knocked firmly. "Enter," came his cold voice. Hermione stepped in. Snape looked up from his desk, expression impassive. "Miss Granger, it's past curfew." "Someone destroyed my belongings, sir." "All of them. There was a note calling me a mudblood and telling me I'm not welcome." Snape's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his dark eyes. "Do you know who did it?" "No, sir. But it was someone in Slytherin House. Someone with access to my dormitory." "I see." Snape stood. "Come with me." He led her back to the Slytherin dormitories and into the girls' section. An unprecedented move. The damage was obvious. Other girls were pretending to sleep, but Hermione could feel them watching. Snape surveyed the destruction silently. Then he turned to address the room. "The student responsible for this has 1 hour to confess and accept appropriate punishment. If no one confesses, every girl in this dormitory loses 50 points and serves detention for a month." Gasps erupted. 50 points was devastating. "That's not fair," Pansy protested. "We didn't all do it." Then the guilty party should confess, Snape said coldly. Otherwise I assume you're all complicit through silence. You have 1 hour. He left, taking Hermione with him. In his office he repaired her belongings with expert spellwork. Books mended, clothes restored, everything as it had been. Thank you, sir, Hermione said quietly. I am head of Slytherin House, Snape said. That means I'm responsible for all my students, regardless of blood status. What happened to you is unacceptable. Will anyone actually confess? Probably not. They'll all lose points and serve detention, and they'll blame you for it. Then why did you threaten them? Snape looked at her directly for the first time. Because you are a Slytherin, Miss Granger. You were sorted into my house. That means you're under my protection, whether your housemates like it or not. And because someone needs to teach them that cunning and ambition don't require blood purity. It was the most supportive thing any professor had said to her since arriving at Hogwarts. I'm trying to prove that, sir, Hermione said. That's why I won't leave. Even though the heir is targeting Muggleborns, I refuse to let them win. Also potentially fatal. Snape's expression was stern. The monster in the chamber is dangerous, Miss Granger. Your courage may be Slytherin, but your survival instincts need work. What is the monster, sir? Snape hesitated. Then, I don't know. But I'm researching it, as should you, carefully. And Miss Granger, if you discover anything significant about the chamber, you will tell me immediately. That's not a request. Yes, sir. Hermione left his office with her repaired belongings and a new understanding. Snape was protecting her, in his way. He wouldn't coddle her or show favoritism, but he wouldn't allow her to be destroyed either. In January, she finally made the connection. The attacks had all occurred near water. The voices Harry had been hearing, voices in the walls that no one else could hear, suggested something moving through pipes. The victims had all been petrified, not killed, suggesting they'd seen something indirectly. A basilisk. The monster was a basilisk, and it was moving through the plumbing. Hermione researched frantically, pulling together evidence. But before she could share her discovery with Harry or Snape, the basilisk found her. She'd been walking alone to the library. A calculated risk, but she'd thought the corridor was safe. She saw the basilisk's reflection in her hand mirror and had just enough time to register what it was before everything went dark. Petrified. She woke in the hospital wing weeks later to find Madame Pomfrey hovering anxiously and Professor McGonagall and Snape standing nearby. Miss Granger, McGonagall said with evident relief. Thank goodness. How do you feel? Petrified, Hermione managed, then realized that was the wrong tense, was petrified. What happened? The Chamber of Secrets was opened, Snape said. The monster was a basilisk, as you'd apparently deduced based on the book you were carrying and the notes found in your hand. Mr. Potter and Mr. Weasley discovered the chamber's location, destroyed the basilisk, and stopped the person who'd opened it. Who opened it? Ginny Weasley, possessed by a diary containing a fragment of the Dark Lord's soul. She's recovering now. Hermione processed this information. A basilisk. Destroyed. The chamber. Closed. She'd been right about the monster, but had fallen victim to it anyway. How long was I petrified? 6 weeks, McGonagall said gently. Your parents were notified. They've been desperately worried. 6 weeks. Hermione had lost 6 weeks, frozen in stone, helpless. Did anyone? She hesitated. Did anyone from my house visit me? McGonagall's expression softened with something like pity. Professor Snape visited daily, and Miss Greengrass came once, though she left quickly. One housemate. Out of an entire house, one person had bothered to visit. Hermione felt that cold determination settle in her chest again. This was what she was fighting against, a house so poisoned by blood purity that they couldn't even show compassion for their own housemate who'd been attacked. She would change that. Somehow, she would prove that Slytherin could be better. When she returned to classes, reactions were mixed. Some students looked relieved she'd survived. Others looked disappointed. Draco made a pointed comment about mudbloods being harder to kill than expected. But Daphne Greengrass approached her that evening in the common room. You figured it out, Daphne said quietly. The basilisk. You wrote it all down in that book they found with you. I did, Hermione confirmed. You could have kept that information to yourself, used it to escape while others were attacked, but you were going to share it, weren't you? That's why you were heading to the library. Information is meant to be used, not hoarded. That's not very Slytherin, Daphne pointed out. Maybe Slytherin needs to redefine itself, Hermione said. Daphne studied her for a moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled slightly. You really believe that, don't you? That you can change an entire house's culture through sheer stubborn brilliance? I have to believe it, Hermione said. Otherwise, what's the point of being here? Second year ended with Gryffindor winning the House Cup again, largely due to Harry and Ron's heroics in the chamber. Hermione had contributed points through her academics, but it wasn't enough to overcome Gryffindor's adventure-earned points. On the train home, she sat with Theodore, Daphne, and Blaise, a small group of Slytherins who'd moved from hostility to cautious alliance over the year. Next year will be different, Blaise predicted. Word is Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban. Black was a Gryffindor, fought against the Dark Lord. His escape means something's changing. What do you mean? Hermione asked. I mean the old alliances are shifting, Blaise said. Pure-blood families are reassessing their positions. Some are doubling down on blood purity. Others are wondering if it's worth it. Your presence here, Granger, proves that blood status and magical ability aren't correlated. That threatens their entire worldview. Good, Hermione said firmly. It should. Theodore actually smiled at that. 2 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be sharing a compartment with a Muggle-born Slytherin and considering her an ally, I'd have called them mad. And now? Hermione asked. Now I think the Sorting Hat knew exactly what it was doing, Theodore said. You're more Slytherin than half our house. You just apply it to different goals than they expect. It was perhaps the greatest compliment Hermione had received at Hogwarts. She was Slytherin, not despite being Muggle-born, but in addition to it. Her cunning, ambition, and strategic thinking were being recognized and valued. She'd survived 2 years. She'd faced a basilisk and won, not through direct confrontation, but through research and deduction. She'd earned grudging respect from some quarters and continued hostility from others. Third year would bring new challenges. Sirius Black, Dementors, the revelation of secrets she couldn't yet imagine. But Hermione Granger, Slytherin, was ready. She'd proven she could survive. Now it was time to prove she could thrive. Third year, Dementors, Time Turners, and Sirius Black Summer brought letters from Hogwarts. Not just her standard book list, but something else. A personal letter from Professor McGonagall requesting permission from Hermione's parents to allow her to use a time turner for the upcoming school year. Hermione read the letter twice, not quite believing it. A time turner, a device that could turn back time itself, allowing her to attend multiple classes simultaneously. It was extraordinarily advanced magic, heavily regulated by the Ministry, and normally reserved for exceptional circumstances. The letter explained, Hermione's academic performance had been so outstanding that the professors agreed she should be permitted to take every elective offered. Ancient runes, arithmancy, care of magical creatures, divination, and Muggle studies. But the schedule conflicts made this physically impossible without time manipulation, hence the time turner. Hermione's parents were hesitant. This seems dangerous, sweetheart, her mother said. Turning back time? What if something goes wrong? It's Ministry-regulated magic, Hermione explained. Completely safe when used properly. And Mum, this is a chance to learn everything. Every subject Hogwarts offers. How can I turn that down? Her father studied the letter carefully. It says here the device is being loaned specifically because of your exceptional academic achievement and demonstrated responsibility. They trust you with this, Hermione. That's remarkable. So I can do it? Her parents exchanged glances. Then her mother signed the permission form. Just promise us you'll be careful, she said. Don't overwork yourself. Hermione promised, already mentally planning her schedule. September 1st arrived with news that dominated the platform. Sirius Black had escaped from Azkaban. Posters with his gaunt, mad face were plastered everywhere, warning that he was dangerous and potentially heading toward Hogwarts. They say he's after Potter, Blaise said as they boarded the train. Wants to finish what the Dark Lord started. Black was a Gryffindor, Daphne pointed out. Fought against Voldemort for years. Why would he serve him now? Maybe he went mad in Azkaban, Theodore suggested. 12 years with Dementors would break anyone. Hermione listened but said nothing. She'd been researching Sirius Black over the summer. The trial transcripts were mysteriously absent from public records, which was suspicious. Black had supposedly killed 13 people with one curse, but the magic required for that seemed impossible. Something about the official story didn't add up. The train journey was interrupted by Dementors searching for Black. When they entered the compartment, Hermione felt cold, unlike anything she'd experienced. All warmth and happiness drained away, leaving only despair and the distant echo of her parents' voices telling her magic wasn't real. She'd imagined it. She didn't belong in the magical world. A Patronus drove the Dementors away. A silvery wolf, cast by Professor Lupin, the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. "Everyone all right?" Lupin asked, handing out chocolate. Hermione accepted a piece, hands shaking. The other Slytherins were similarly shaken. Even Draco Malfoy looked pale and frightened. "What were those things?" a first-year asked. "Dementors," Lupin said. "Azkaban guards, searching the train for Sirius Black? They won't hurt you, but they do have an unfortunate effect on people." Hermione had read about Dementors, creatures that fed on happiness, leaving only misery in their wake. The books hadn't mentioned how utterly terrible they felt in person. At Hogwarts, Dumbledore announced that Dementors would be stationed around the school grounds for the students' protection, while Black remained at large. The news was met with mixed reactions. Safety was good, but Dementors were horrifying. That evening, Hermione received her time-turner from Professor McGonagall in a private meeting. "This is an extraordinary responsibility, Miss Granger," McGonagall said, placing the delicate golden chain around Hermione's neck. "The time-turner must never be seen by others. You must not be observed traveling back in time. And under no circumstances should you interact with your past self. The consequences of careless time travel can be catastrophic." "I understand, Professor," Hermione said seriously. "I hope you do. You're the only student in your year, possibly the only student in decades, to be entrusted with one of these. Don't make me regret advocating for you." Hermione touched the tiny hourglass pendant. "May I ask why you did advocate for me, Professor?" "Given that I'm in Slytherin and you're head of Gryffindor." McGonagall's expression softened slightly. "Because you're brilliant, Miss Granger. Because your house doesn't define your worth. And because I believe in nurturing exceptional talent wherever it appears, even if it appears somewhere I didn't expect." It was perhaps the kindest thing any professor besides Snape had said to Hermione about her sorting. Classes began, and Hermione's schedule became immediately chaotic. Using the time-turner, she attended ancient runes at 9, then turned back time to attend arithmancy at 9, then turned back again for care of magical creatures at 9. By lunch, she'd already lived through 5 hours, while only 3 had passed for everyone else. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Defense Against the Dark Arts with Professor Lupin was excellent. Finally, a competent teacher. He was patient, knowledgeable, and treated students fairly regardless of house. When he taught them about Boggarts and Hermione's Boggart transformed into Professor McGonagall telling her she'd failed all her exams, Lupin didn't mock her. He simply coached her through the ridiculous charm with understanding. "Fear of failure is common among high achievers," he said quietly after class. "But remember, Miss Granger, your worth isn't determined by your grades." "In Slytherin it is," Hermione replied honestly. "My grades are the only reason some of them tolerate me at all." Lupin looked troubled by that, but didn't contradict her. Care of magical creatures was taught by Hagrid, the gamekeeper, who was enthusiastic but dangerously unqualified. His first lesson involved hippogriffs, beautiful but temperamental creatures that required respect and proper approach. Draco Malfoy, of course, ignored the safety instructions and was attacked. The hippogriff Buckbeak slashed his arm, and Draco milked the injury for all it was worth, claiming he was dying. Hermione watched with clinical detachment as Madame Pomfrey healed the shallow wound in seconds. Draco's dramatics were transparent. He was trying to get Hagrid fired, and the hippogriff executed. "That was pathetic," she said flatly, when they returned to the common room. "Excuse me?" Draco rounded on her. "You insulted a dangerous creature against explicit instructions, got exactly what you deserved, and now you're playing victim to destroy Hagrid's career. It's manipulative, but it's also obvious. You're better than this." "Better than what?" "Better than getting revenge on a half-breed who endangered students. Better than using your father's influence and your own victim complex to ruin someone's life over a minor injury. That's not cunning, Draco. That's just petty." The common room went quiet. Hermione had just challenged Draco Malfoy publicly again. And this time, she'd called out his cowardice. "My father will hear about this," Draco said, his usual threat. "I'm sure he will," Hermione replied. "I'm sure he'll be very proud that his son cried about a scratch, while a Muggle-born Slytherin told him the truth he didn't want to hear." She walked away before Draco could respond. Heart pounding. That had been risky. Very risky. But she was tired of Draco's entitled behavior and his constant weaponization of his father's influence. Later, Daphne approached her. That was either brilliantly Slytherin or suicidally stupid. Which do you think it was? Both. You used Draco's pride against him. He can't complain to his father without admitting a Muggle-born challenged him and he had no comeback. But you also made a powerful enemy. Draco was already my enemy. True. But now he knows you're willing to confront him publicly. That changes the dynamic. Hermione had realized this. She was shifting from defensive survival to active challenge. It was dangerous but necessary. She'd never earn real respect through quiet competence alone. In October, the Dementors affected Hermione more severely than most students. During a Quidditch match, they swarmed the pitch, and Hermione felt that terrible cold overwhelm her again. This time, the voices were worse. Her parents' disappointment, her housemates' hatred, a future where she failed and proved every blood purist right. She fainted in the stands. When she woke in the hospital wing, Professor Lupin was there. The Dementors affect you particularly strongly, he observed. That suggests significant fears and painful memories, Miss Granger. I'm fine, Hermione said automatically. You're not fine. You're a brilliant witch carrying enormous pressure, living in a house where you're not fully accepted, proving yourself constantly. That's not fine, that's exhausting. Hermione blinked back unexpected tears. No professor had ever acknowledged the reality of her situation so directly. I can teach you the Patronus charm, Lupin offered. It's advanced magic, usually not taught until 7th year, but I think you're capable. And you clearly need protection against Dementors. Yes, please, Hermione said immediately. The Patronus lessons began that week. Hermione learned that the charm required focusing on her happiest memory while casting, but therein lay the problem. Her happiest memories at Hogwarts were complicated by the reality of living in Slytherin. Her childhood memories were happy but felt distant, disconnected from her magical self. Think of a moment when you felt truly, purely happy, Lupin coached. No complications, no fear, just joy. Hermione thought of receiving her Hogwarts letter, the moment she'd known magic was real, that she belonged somewhere, that she wasn't strange but special. Expecto Patronum! Silver mist erupted from her wand, but no corporeal form appeared yet. Excellent start, Lupin encouraged. The mist alone is impressive for a 3rd year. Keep practicing. She practiced obsessively, using the time turner to fit in extra sessions. Slowly, the mist began to take shape, something small and quick, darting through the air. By December, she could produce a corporeal Patronus, a sleek, bright otter that bounded through Lupin's office with playful energy. Remarkable, Lupin said, genuinely impressed. A corporeal Patronus at 13. Your magical ability is extraordinary, Miss Granger. Thank you, Professor. May I ask, what memory are you using? Getting my Hogwarts letter, knowing I was a witch. Lupin's expression grew thoughtful. Not a memory from Hogwarts itself? Those are complicated, Hermione admitted. Being here is important, and I'm learning so much, but it's not purely happy. Because of your house placement? Because I'm fighting every day to prove I belong. That's fulfilling in its way, but it's not joyful. It shouldn't have to be a fight, Lupin said gently. But it is. So I fight. Christmas brought a revelation. Hermione was staying at Hogwarts again. The time turner made leaving impossible. She'd lose track of which timeline she was in. On Christmas morning, she received presents from her parents, from Theodore and Daphne, books on advanced magic, and surprisingly, an anonymous gift, a beautiful silver bookmark engraved with, "Knowledge is the truest power." She suspected Professor Snape, though she couldn't prove it. The castle was nearly empty. Hermione spent hours in the library, researching Sirius Black and growing more convinced that something about the official story was wrong. The more she read about the night of his alleged betrayal, the less sense it made. She encountered Harry in the library. He was researching the same thing. "You don't believe Black is guilty?" Harry said, surprising her. "I'm not sure," Hermione admitted. "The evidence is circumstantial. The trial transcripts are sealed. And the magic required to kill 13 people with one curse. It's theoretically impossible." "He was my parents' best friend," Harry said quietly. "James made him my godfather. Would my dad really have chosen someone capable of betraying him? People change. Stress, fear, power. They corrupt. But what if they didn't change? What if he was framed? Hermione considered this. If he was framed, we need to know by whom, and why. And how they managed to fool the entire ministry. They researched together throughout the holiday, building a case that something in the official story didn't add up. Peter Pettigrew's body was never recovered, only a finger. The supposed witnesses to Black's crime had given contradictory statements. Black hadn't received a trial with veritaserum, which was standard procedure. "This is a conspiracy," Harry said finally. "Someone framed him. Someone powerful enough to manipulate the ministry. Or someone who benefited from having a convenient scapegoat," Hermione added. Who gained from Black being imprisoned? They couldn't answer that question yet. But the seed of doubt was planted. In February, the truth came out in the most dramatic way possible. Hermione had been using the time turner to attend 3 evening study sessions simultaneously, an exhausting but manageable routine. She was heading back to the Slytherin dormitories when she heard shouting from the grounds. Harry and Ron had cornered someone in the shrieking shack. Hermione's curiosity overcame her caution. She followed the sounds and found herself witnessing the revelation. Sirius Black wasn't a traitor. Peter Pettigrew was alive, had been hiding as Ron's rat Scabbers for 12 years. Pettigrew had betrayed the Potters. Black had been framed. Professor Lupin was there too. A werewolf, Hermione realized with shock, and Black's old friend. Together they cornered Pettigrew, forcing him to confess. Hermione watched from the shadows, mind racing. This changed everything. If Black was innocent, he'd been wrongly imprisoned for 12 years. If Pettigrew was the real traitor, he needed to be captured and brought to justice. But then it went wrong. The full moon rose, Lupin transformed into a werewolf, Pettigrew escaped, Black fled. Still a wanted fugitive despite being innocent. Hermione made a split-second decision. She couldn't let an innocent man be captured, or an guilty one escape. She found Harry and explained about the time turner, showed him the device that had been her secret for months. Together they traveled back 3 hours and changed events. They saved Buckbeak the Hippogriff from execution. Draco's crusade had succeeded in getting the creature condemned, but now they stole it before the execution. They saved Sirius Black from the Dementor's kiss by driving the creatures away with Harry's Patronus. It was dangerous, illegal use of the time turner. McGonagall would be furious if she knew. But it was also the right thing to do, saving an innocent man and preventing a miscarriage of justice. When they returned to their proper timeline, Sirius Black had escaped on Buckbeak's back. Pettigrew was still free, but at least Black was safe. "You broke about 17 laws helping me," Harry said. 18, actually, Hermione corrected. "But who's counting?" "Thank you. For believing he was innocent. For helping me save him." "It was the logical thing to do," Hermione said. "The evidence pointed to his innocence. Acting on that evidence was just good reasoning." "It was brave," Harry corrected. "Very Gryffindor." "It was cunning," Hermione countered. "Using time travel to achieve our goals while avoiding detection." "Very Slytherin." Harry smiled slightly. "You're both, aren't you? Brave and cunning." "Maybe that's what the Sorting Hat saw," Hermione said. "Someone who could be either. It chose Slytherin because that's where I'd learn the most, grow the most, prove the most." "Do you regret it, being sorted there?" Hermione considered the question honestly. 2.5 years of hostility, isolation, constant fighting to prove herself. But also, 2.5 years of becoming stronger, sharper, more strategic, learning to survive and thrive in hostile territory. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it. It made me who I am." The aftermath of the Black situation was complicated. The ministry maintained that Black was guilty. They couldn't admit they'd imprisoned an innocent man for 12 years. Hermione couldn't reveal her involvement without exposing the time turner. But she'd learned something crucial. The ministry could be wrong. Authority wasn't always right. Sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. Very Slytherin logic, she reflected. Dumbledore would call it situational ethics. Her housemates would call it pragmatism. Hermione was learning that Slytherin values, cunning, ambition, resourcefulness, could serve good purposes when applied with the right moral framework. She didn't have to become like Draco or Pansy or the blood purists who dominated her house. She could be her own kind of Slytherin. Third year ended with Hermione having survived another year, having learned to cast a corporeal Patronus, having helped save an innocent man's life. Her grades were perfect across all her classes, even divination, though she dropped it after one session because Professor Trelawney was an obvious fraud. You survived third year without getting petrified or attacked, Daphne observed on the train home. That's progress. The bar for success is remarkably low, Hermione replied. Welcome to Slytherin, Theodore said dryly, where surviving is success and thriving is suspicious. Hermione smiled despite herself. She had allies now, not friends exactly, but people who respected her and occasionally even liked her. That was more than she'd had first year. Fourth year would bring the Tri-Wizard tournament and challenges she couldn't anticipate, but Hermione Granger, Slytherin, was ready for whatever came next. Fourth year, the Tri-Wizard tournament, summer brought news that shook the wizarding world. The Tri-Wizard tournament would be held at Hogwarts after a century's absence. 3 schools, 3 champions, 3 deadly tasks. Hermione read everything she could find about the tournament's history. The death toll was appalling. Students killed by dragons, drowned in the lake, lost in magical mazes. The tournament had been discontinued for good reason. They're mad to bring it back, her mother said when Hermione explained it over dinner. There are new safety measures, Hermione assured her. An age limit, only students 17 or older can enter. That keeps younger students safe. You're 14, so you can't enter anyway. I wouldn't want to, Hermione said honestly. The tournament is about glory and competition. I'm more interested in learning than proving myself in combat. September 1st arrived with 3 schools converging on Hogwarts. Beauxbatons arrived in a flying carriage, Durmstrang in a ship that rose from the Black Lake. Hermione watched the arrivals with clinical interest, cataloging the different magical traditions and wondering what she could learn from the visiting students. The Durmstrang students wore fur capes and looked hardened, serious. Their headmaster, Igor Karkaroff, was a former Death Eater who'd bought his freedom by naming names. The Slytherins whispered about him with a mixture of respect and contempt. Respect for his survival skills, contempt for his betrayal of fellow Death Eaters. My father says Karkaroff is a coward, Draco announced in the common room. He turned on the Dark Lord the moment it was convenient. Your father would know about cowardice, Hermione said without looking up from her book. Given that he claimed to be under the Imperious Curse to avoid prison, the common room went dead silent. Hermione had just called Lucius Malfoy a coward and a liar to his son's face. Draco's face flushed red. How dare you? It's public record, Hermione said calmly, finally looking up. The trial transcripts are available in the library. Your father claimed the Imperious Curse forced him to serve Voldemort. The Wizengamot believed him, though many questioned whether it was true or simply a convenient story from a man with enough gold to buy his freedom. You filthy mudblood! 20 points from Slytherin, Professor Snape's cold voice cut through the room. Everyone turned to find their head of house standing in the doorway, having entered silently. But sir, she insulted my father, Draco protested. She cited publicly available legal records. You responded with a slur. The point loss stands. Snape's dark eyes fixed on Hermione. Miss Granger, while factually accurate, antagonizing your housemates serves no productive purpose. Yes, sir, Hermione said. However, Snape continued, his gaze shifting to Draco. Mr. Malfoy, if you cannot handle factual discussion of your family's history without resorting to slurs, perhaps you should avoid the topic entirely. It was the closest thing to public support Snape had ever given Hermione. The message was clear. She was under his protection, even when she was being deliberately provocative. The Goblet of Fire was revealed at the Halloween feast. Students 17 and older could submit their names. Dumbledore emphasized the age restriction and the danger involved. That night, someone circumvented the age line and submitted Harry Potter's name. When Harry's name came out of the goblet as the 4th champion, binding him to compete despite being 14 and unwilling, the Great Hall erupted in shock and outrage. At the Slytherin table, reactions were mixed. Some thought Harry had cheated for glory. Others recognized that he looked genuinely terrified and confused. Hermione watched him carefully and came to a conclusion. Someone had entered Harry's name without his knowledge or consent. This was a setup, a trap designed to put the boy who lived in mortal danger. But who and why? She approached Harry the next day in the library, where he was surrounded by books on dragon handling and looking overwhelmed. You didn't enter yourself, Hermione said without preamble. No, Harry said, relieved that someone believed him. I didn't. I don't know how my name got in there. Someone powerful enough to fool the goblet's enchantments. Someone who wants you in the tournament. That suggests you're in serious danger. I know that, Harry said tiredly. Ron thinks I'm lying about not entering. Half the school thinks I cheated, and now I have to face a dragon in a few weeks. Then you need help, Hermione decided. Research support, strategic planning. You need an ally who understands the political implications of what's happening. Why would you help me? Harry asked. Your house hates me. Helping me won't make you popular in Slytherin. I'm not popular in Slytherin anyway, Hermione said pragmatically. Might as well be useful. Besides, Harry, someone entered you in a deadly tournament against your will. That's attempted murder. I can't just ignore that. They became research partners, meeting regularly in the library. Hermione helped Harry prepare for each task with the same intensity she applied to her own studies. The first task was dragons. Hermione researched dragon weaknesses, vulnerabilities, historical accounts of wizards defeating them. She taught Harry the summoning charm, Accio, so he could call his firebolt and use his seeker skills to evade the dragon while grabbing the golden egg. You're brilliant, Harry said after successfully executing the charm for the 50th time. This'll actually work. Of course it'll work, Hermione said. It's strategically sound. Use your strengths, flying and quick reflexes, rather than trying to outpower a dragon with magic you barely know. The task itself was terrifying to watch. Hermione sat in the stands with the other Slytherins, most of whom were cheering for Cedric Diggory or the other champions. She watched Harry face the Hungarian Horntail, the most dangerous dragon, and execute their plan perfectly. He summoned his broom, flew circles around the dragon, grabbed the golden egg in a spectacular dive. The crowd erupted in cheers. You helped him with that, Daphne said quietly beside Hermione. I provided research support, Hermione replied neutrally. You taught him the summoning charm. I recognize your teaching style. Precise, methodical, practiced until perfect. Is that a problem? No, Daphne said thoughtfully. It's interesting. You're helping a Gryffindor compete against our own house champion. That's not very Slytherin, isn't it? Hermione countered. I'm building an alliance with the boy who lived. That's long-term strategic thinking. Very Slytherin. Daphne smiled slightly. Keep telling yourself that, Granger. But we both know you're helping him because it's right, not because it's strategic. Maybe that was true. Hermione was beginning to realize that her Slytherin identity and her moral compass didn't have to be in conflict. She could be cunning and ambitious while still doing the right thing. The Yule Ball brought new complications. As a Triwizard champion, Harry needed a date. To Hermione's surprise, he asked her, You want me to go to the ball with you? Hermione asked, certain she'd misunderstood. If you're willing, Harry said. You've been helping me with the tournament. You're my friend, even if we're in different houses. And honestly, you're one of the few people not treating me like either a cheater or a celebrity. Harry, I'm Slytherin. Taking me to the ball will cause gossip. Let them gossip. Will you go with me? Hermione considered the political implications. Going to the ball with Harry Potter would signal to both Slytherin and the other houses that she was firmly in Harry's camp. It would likely increase hostility from blood purists, but it would also demonstrate that house divisions didn't have to prevent friendship. Yes, she said. I'll go with you. The announcement caused exactly the reaction Hermione expected. The Slytherins were appalled that she'd accepted a Gryffindor's invitation. Draco made pointed comments about blood traitors. Pansy called her a house disgrace, but some reactions surprised her. Theodore shrugged and said, It's strategic. Potter's influential. Daphne offered to help her shop for dress robes. Even Blaise commented, You're making a statement. That takes courage. Hermione went dress shopping with Daphne, which was surreal, shopping for formal robes with a pure-blood Slytherin who 6 months ago had barely tolerated her existence. Why are you helping me? Hermione asked as they examined dress options in Madame Malkin's. Because you're interesting, Daphne said. You're brilliant, you're refusing to conform to what Slytherin expects, and you're somehow friends with Harry Potter, despite being in rival houses. I want to see where that goes. That's very Slytherin reasoning. I am very Slytherin, Daphne said. But I'm also realizing that blood purity is nonsense. You're better at magic than most purebloods in our year. That suggests talent isn't about blood. It's about ability and effort. You're proving that every day. They found a periwinkle blue dress that made Hermione's eyes stand out. It was beautiful and expensive. Hermione used some of the gold her parents had exchanged at Gringotts, money they'd saved specifically for special occasions. The night of the Yule Ball, Hermione transformed herself. She used Sleekeasy's hair potion to tame her bushy hair into an elegant updo, applied minimal makeup with Daphne's help, put on the blue dress, and looked in the mirror. She barely recognized herself. "You look beautiful," Daphne said sincerely. "I look like someone else," Hermione replied. "You look like yourself without armor," Daphne corrected. "Without books to hide behind, or house prejudice to defend against, just Hermione." When Hermione descended to meet Harry, his expression of shock and appreciation was gratifying. They entered the great hall together to stares and whispers, the Gryffindor hero and the Slytherin genius, defying house divisions. The ball itself was magical. Hermione danced with Harry, laughed at his terrible jokes, forgot for a few hours that she was the mudblood Slytherin, and just enjoyed being a teenage girl at a beautiful party. "Thank you," Harry said during a slow dance. "For helping me this year. For being my friend despite the house rivalry." "Thank you for asking me," Hermione replied. "For seeing past the green and silver." "Houses don't matter," Harry said. "Not really. People matter. Character matters. You could be sorted into any house and you'd still be brilliant." It was perhaps the kindest thing anyone had said to her at Hogwarts. The second task came in February, retrieving something precious from the Black Lake. Hermione researched underwater breathing methods and found gillyweed in the library's herbology section. "It'll give you gills and webbed hands for about an hour," she explained, showing Harry the plant. "Long enough to swim to the bottom and back." Harry took the gillyweed but looked nervous. "What if something goes wrong?" "Then, you trust your instincts and improvise. You're good at that, Harry, better than you think." The task revealed that each champion's precious thing was a person. For Harry, it was Ron Weasley. Hermione watched from the shore as Harry rescued Ron, and also saved Fleur's sister Gabrielle when Fleur couldn't complete the task. "He came in last," Draco sneered afterward. "Proof that Gryffindor courage is just stupidity." "He saved 2 people, Hermione countered. "That's not stupid. That's moral courage, something you wouldn't understand." The tension between her and the blood purists in Slytherin was reaching a breaking point. She was openly allied with Harry Potter, had attended the Yule Ball with him, and continued to challenge pure-blood supremacy at every opportunity. Something had to give. It did, in March, when Hermione found her belongings vandalized again, this time worse than before. Not just destroyed, but defiled. Mudblood scrawled across her books in permanent ink. Her clothes shredded beyond repair. Everything she owned ruined with malicious thoroughness. She stood in the wreckage and felt cold fury replace the fear and hurt she'd felt first year. She went to Professor Snape's office. "It's happened again, sir," she said without preamble. Snape looked up from his work, expression darkening. "Show me." He followed her to the dormitory, surveyed the damage, then returned to the common room where most of the house was gathered. "Whoever destroyed Miss Granger's belongings has 1 hour to confess," Snape said, his voice deadly quiet. "If no one confesses, every Slytherin student loses 100 points and serves detention for the remainder of the term." The punishment was harsh enough that it couldn't be ignored. But Hermione already knew no one would confess. They'd all lose points and blame her for it, which would make things worse. "Sir," Hermione said carefully, "may I make a suggestion?" Snape looked at her, waiting. "Instead of collective punishment, could we approach this differently? Whoever did this clearly has strong feelings about my presence in Slytherin. Perhaps we should discuss those feelings openly rather than punishing everyone for one person's actions." It was a gamble, offering dialogue instead of retribution. But Hermione had learned that Slytherins respected clever solutions over brute force. Snape considered her suggestion. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. "Very well. Anyone who wishes to voice their concerns about Miss Granger's place in Slytherin may do so now. I will listen. But the conversation will remain civil, or punishment stands." Silence. Then Pansy Parkinson stood. "She shouldn't be here," Pansy said bluntly. "She's Muggle-born. Slytherin is for pure bloods. Having her here pollutes our house." "Salazar Slytherin valued ambition and cunning," Snape said. "Neither quality requires pure blood." "But Miss Granger has the highest grades in her year," Snape continued. "She has contributed more house points through academic excellence than any other student. She has represented Slytherin with distinction. On what grounds beyond blood prejudice do you object to her presence?" Pansy couldn't answer. The logic was irrefutable. Theodore Nott stood next. "I don't agree with Pansy. Granger belongs here as much as any of us. But she's also allied with Harry Potter and other Gryffindors. That creates conflict. Is her loyalty to Slytherin or to them?" It was a fair question, more thoughtful than Pansy's pure bigotry. My loyalty is to truth and doing what's right, Hermione said clearly. Harry Potter was entered in the Triwizard Tournament against his will. Helping him survive that isn't disloyalty, it's opposing injustice. If Slytherin values cunning and resourcefulness, shouldn't we also value standing up for people being targeted unfairly? That's Gryffindor thinking, someone called out. That's ethical thinking, Hermione corrected, which should matter regardless of house. I'm Slytherin. That means I value ambition. My ambition is proving that Muggleborns can excel in magic. It means I value cunning. I use strategy and careful planning to achieve my goals. It means I value resourcefulness. I solve problems creatively rather than with brute force. But none of that requires me to be cruel or prejudiced, or to abandon my principles. She looked around the common room at her housemates, some hostile, some thoughtful, some uncertain. I know many of you will never accept me, Hermione continued. I'm Muggleborn, I'm friends with Harry Potter, I challenge your beliefs about blood purity, but I'm here, I was sorted here, and I'm not leaving. So you have a choice. You can keep trying to drive me out and fail, or you can accept that Slytherin House can be more than you thought it was. Silence fell. Then, unexpectedly, Gemma Farley stood, the prefect who'd helped Hermione first year. Granger's right, Gemma said. I'm pure blood. I was raised believing blood purity mattered. But watching her excel at magic while being Muggle-born forced me to question that. Either I accept that blood determines magical ability and ignore the evidence in front of me, or I accept that I was taught lies and that talent comes from individual effort. I choose evidence over prejudice. It was a radical statement from a pure-blood Slytherin. Several students looked shocked. A few looked thoughtful. We can't change centuries of Slytherin tradition because one mudblood is good at school, Draco said. Slytherin tradition has produced dark wizards and failures in equal measure, Snape said coldly. Tradition isn't inherently valuable. Results are. Miss Granger produces results. That's what Slytherin should value. The discussion continued, but something had shifted. Not acceptance exactly. Many students still hated Hermione for her blood status, but acknowledgement. She'd forced them to confront the contradiction between their beliefs and reality. She'd survived another attack. But more than that, she'd used it to challenge the house's fundamental assumptions. Very Slytherin indeed. Fourth year continued, the graveyard, the third task. The maze arrived in June with mounting dread. Hermione had researched every creature and enchantment likely to be in the maze, had drilled Harry on counter curses and defensive spells, had mapped strategy until he could navigate theoretical mazes in his sleep, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The whole tournament has been orchestrated, she told Harry the night before the final task. Your name in the goblet, the specific challenges, the timing. Someone's been manipulating events all year. But why? Harry asked. What's the point of forcing me to compete? I don't know. But Harry, tomorrow, be paranoid. Trust no one except yourself. If anything seems wrong, retreat. Survival matters more than winning. Harry nodded seriously. I'll be careful. Hermione watched the third task from the stands with her heart in her throat. Champions entered the maze and disappeared into magical darkness. Time crawled past. 10 minutes, 20, 45. Then the cannon fired, signaling the task's end, and Harry reappeared clutching Cedric Diggory's body and screaming that Voldemort was back. The world stopped. Hermione ran to the maze entrance with everyone else. Harry was hysterical, covered in blood, clutching Cedric and babbling about graveyards and Voldemort and Peter Pettigrew. Mad-Eye Moody pulled him away roughly. Dumbledore and the other professors converged. Chaos erupted. Cedric was dead. Harry was traumatized. And if what he was saying was true, if Voldemort had truly returned, then everything was about to change. Hermione watched the aftermath unfold with growing horror. Harry was taken to the hospital wing. Moody disappeared, was revealed to be Barty Crouch Jr. using Polyjuice Potion, the Death Eater who'd orchestrated the entire tournament to deliver Harry to Voldemort. The real Moody was found imprisoned in a magical trunk. The Dark Lord had returned, had used Harry's blood in a resurrection ritual, had dueled Harry and failed to kill him because their wands were brothers, creating Priori Incantatem. And Cedric Diggory, a Hufflepuff student, someone's son, a brilliant 17-year-old with his whole life ahead, was dead, murdered by Peter Pettigrew on Voldemort's orders. Hermione sat in the Slytherin common room that night listening to her housemates' reactions and felt sick. "The Dark Lord has returned," Draco said, voice hushed with awe and fear. "My father always said he would." "Potter claims the Dark Lord is back," Pansy corrected. "He's probably lying for attention." "Why would he lie about that?" Theodore asked. "What does he gain from claiming the Dark Lord returned? Fame? Sympathy? Gryffindor always needs to be the center of attention." Hermione stood abruptly. "Harry Potter watched someone die tonight. He was tortured with the Cruciatus curse. He fought a duel with Voldemort and barely escaped. Whether you believe him or not, he's traumatized and terrified. Show some basic human decency." "Since when do you care about Potter?" Pansy sneered. "Since always. Because I'm not a sociopath." "A student died, Pansy. Cedric Diggory is dead, and you're sitting here treating it like political gossip." She left the common room and went to the hospital wing. Harry was unconscious, Madame Pomfrey having given him dreamless sleep potion. Hermione sat beside his bed, keeping vigil. "He told the truth," Dumbledore said quietly, appearing beside her. "The Dark Lord has indeed returned. You believe Harry, I take it?" "Of course I believe him," Hermione said. "Harry has no reason to lie. And the evidence supports his account. Cedric's death, the Polyjuice potion plot, the timing. Someone orchestrated this entire tournament to bring Harry to Voldemort." "Indeed." Dumbledore looked at her carefully. "You're a Slytherin who believes in Harry Potter's word over the Ministry's denial. That suggests considerable character, Miss Granger." "It suggests basic pattern recognition, sir. The Ministry denied Sirius Black was innocent despite evidence. They'll deny Voldemort's return for the same reason. Acknowledging it would require action they're not prepared to take." "Wise analysis. Tell me, Miss Granger, when the war comes, and it will come, where will your loyalties lie?" It was a pointed question. Hermione was Slytherin, a house known for producing Death Eaters and dark wizards. She was Muggle-born, Voldemort's primary target. The conflict between house identity and survival was stark. "My loyalties lie with stopping Voldemort," Hermione said firmly. "Because I'm Muggle-born and he wants me dead. Because I believe in justice. Because I refuse to accept a world where blood status determines worth. And because Harry Potter is my friend, and I don't abandon my friends. Even though supporting Harry will make you a pariah in your own house, I'm already a pariah, sir. Might as well be a pariah who's doing the right thing." Dumbledore smiled slightly. "The Sorting Hat chose well when it placed you in Slytherin. You're teaching that house lessons it desperately needs to learn." The remainder of fourth year was tense. The Ministry refused to acknowledge Voldemort's return, called Harry a liar and an attention seeker. The Daily Prophet ran smear campaigns. Students were divided between those who believed Harry and those who thought he'd gone mad. In Slytherin House, the division was even more pronounced. Pureblood students whose families had been Death Eaters whispered excitedly about the Dark Lord's return. Others were terrified. Some, like Theodore and Daphne, were uncertain. "If the Dark Lord is back," Daphne said quietly during one of their library sessions, "my family will have to choose sides. My father served him during the First War. He'll expect me to follow his ideology, will you?" Hermione asked. "I don't know. I was raised believing pure blood supremacy was right, but you've challenged that belief every day for 4 years. I'm not sure what I believe anymore." It was honest in a way Daphne had never been before. "You believe what the evidence tells you," Hermione said. "Look at magical ability objectively. Look at who succeeds and who fails. Look at whether blood actually correlates with power, or if it's just a comfortable lie that lets pure bloods feel superior. If I reject blood purity, I reject my family's entire worldview." "Then reject it," Hermione said bluntly. "Build your own worldview based on truth rather than tradition." "That's what I've been doing since I was 11. The summer brought news that confirmed Harry's account. Death Eater attacks began, small at first, then escalating. The Ministry continued denying Voldemort's return, but the evidence became undeniable. Hermione spent the summer preparing. She read every book she could find on defensive magic, dark creatures, Death Eater tactics. She practiced spells until her wand hand ached. She planned escape routes, defensive strategies, ways to protect her Muggle parents from a war they didn't understand. Her parents noticed her intensity. "Hermione, you're scaring us," her mother said. "What's happening at school?" Hermione considered lying, considered protecting them through ignorance. But they deserved the truth. There's a dark wizard who hates muggle-borns like me, she said carefully. He was defeated years ago, but he's returned. There's going to be a war. I need to be ready. Then we'll fight too, her father said immediately. You're muggles. You can't fight wizards. We can protect ourselves. We can be vigilant. We can support you. Her mother's voice was firm. You're our daughter. If you're in danger, we face it together. Hermione felt tears prick her eyes. Her parents didn't fully understand magic, couldn't cast spells or brew potions, but they understood love and loyalty. That mattered more than magic. 5th year, Umbridge and resistance. September brought Dolores Umbridge and ministry interference that turned Hogwarts into a battlefield of a different kind. Umbridge was appointed Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher by the ministry, clearly sent to suppress any mention of Voldemort's return. Her first lesson made her intentions obvious. They would learn theory only, no practical magic, no defensive spells. But we need to defend ourselves, Harry protested. From what, Mr. Potter? There are no threats in school. Voldemort is back. Umbridge gave him detention, made him write lines with a blood quill that carved words into his skin. I must not tell lies. When Hermione discovered the scars on Harry's hand, she felt cold fury. She's torturing you, Hermione said flatly. That's illegal. We report this to Dumbledore. She's protected by the ministry. Dumbledore can't do anything. Then we work around her. Hermione began organizing. She approached students she knew were concerned about their lack of defensive training. Harry, Ron, Neville, some Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs. Conspicuously, she approached some Slytherins too. We need practical defense instruction, she told Theodore and Daphne. Umbridge won't teach us. We need to teach ourselves. You want to start an underground defense group, Theodore said slowly. That's risky. Everything's risky now. Voldemort is back. We need to be ready. And you want Slytherins involved? Daphne asked skeptically. I want anyone who's willing to learn. House divisions are meaningless when dark wizards are torturing muggles. Theodore and Daphne agreed to join and to recruit other Slytherins who might be open to it. It was delicate work. Most Slytherin's families supported Voldemort, or at least didn't oppose him. But some students were questioning their parents' beliefs. The group, which Harry insisted on calling Dumbledore's Army or the DA, met secretly in the Room of Requirement. Harry taught practical defensive magic because he had actual experience fighting dark wizards. Hermione organized the curriculum, researched spells, created practice schedules. The Slytherin participation was limited but significant. Theodore, Daphne, Blaise, and a few others attended regularly. They were quiet, cautious about being discovered, but they practiced as hard as anyone. This is treason against the Dark Lord, Blaise said once during practice. If our families knew we were here, then we make sure they don't know, Daphne said firmly. What happens in the DA stays in the DA. Hermione's position in Slytherin became increasingly precarious. She was openly defying Umbridge, associating with Harry Potter, and running a resistance group. Her housemates who supported Voldemort viewed her as a traitor. Those who were uncertain viewed her as dangerously rebellious. Umbridge discovered the DA in February. Someone had betrayed them. Marietta Edgecombe from Ravenclaw, who'd attended one meeting and told Umbridge everything, out of fear. Umbridge tried to arrest Harry. Dumbledore intervened, took responsibility, and fled the school to avoid Azkaban. Umbridge became Hogwarts High Inquisitor with sweeping powers. She began purging the school of anyone she viewed as rebellious. The DA members faced detention, surveillance, threats. Hermione was targeted specifically, a Muggle-born Slytherin who'd organized resistance against ministry authority. You're a disgrace to your house, Umbridge told Hermione during one brutal detention session. A mudblood in Slytherin, corrupting pure-blood students with your rebellious ideas. The only disgrace is the ministry denying reality while students suffer, Hermione replied, even as the blood quill carved into her hand. You'll be expelled before term ends. I'll make sure of it. But Hermione had learned from 4 years in Slytherin. She documented everything, every illegal detention, every blood quill session, every abuse of power. She sent copies to her parents, to the Board of Governors, to anyone who might intervene. She also continued running the DA underground, more carefully now. They met in smaller groups, rotated locations, used code words. Umbridge knew the group existed but couldn't catch them meeting. The Department of Mysteries incident happened in June. Harry had a vision of Sirius being tortured, bait from Voldemort to lure Harry into a trap. Harry insisted on going to rescue Sirius. "It's a trap," Hermione said immediately. "Voldemort is using your connection to manipulate you." "I can't risk Sirius dying," Harry argued. "And I can't risk you dying." "Harry, think. Why would Voldemort torture Sirius in a place you could see through your scar connection? He's baiting you." But Harry was determined. Ron, Neville, Luna, and Ginny agreed to go with him. Hermione had no choice. If Harry was going into danger, she'd go too to maximize his chances of survival. She also sent word to Theodore. "Emergency at Ministry. Tell Snape." The Department of Mysteries was a trap, exactly as Hermione predicted. Death Eaters were waiting, led by Lucius Malfoy. They wanted a prophecy about Harry and Voldemort, and they were willing to kill to get it. The battle was brutal. 6 students against a dozen Death Eaters, fighting for their lives in a maze of mysteries and dangerous magical objects. Hermione cast every spell she knew: shields, stunners, cutting curses. She fought with the cunning and precision of a Slytherin, targeting weak points, using environment strategically. A Death Eater's curse hit her chest. She fell, bleeding and unconscious. She woke in the hospital wing days later to find the war had begun in earnest. The Ministry had finally acknowledged Voldemort's return after he'd appeared at the Ministry and fought Dumbledore publicly. The Daily Prophet was reporting Death Eater attacks. Everything had changed. "You were hurt badly," Madame Pomfrey said, a dark curse to the chest. "You're lucky to be alive." "The others?" Hermione managed. "All survived. Mr. Potter's godfather, Sirius Black, was killed in the battle. Harry is not doing well." Hermione forced herself upright despite Pomfrey's protests. She needed to see Harry, needed to confirm her friends were alive. In the hospital wing's other beds were Neville, broken nose, Ron, brain injury that had been healed but left him weak, and in a chair beside Harry's bed was Ginny, who looked exhausted but unharmed. "Hermione," Harry said, voice raw, "you're awake." "Sirius?" she asked, though she already knew. "Dead. Bellatrix killed him. He fell through the veil." Hermione sat on Harry's bed and took his hand. No words would make this better. Sirius had been innocent, had been Harry's godfather, had represented Harry's connection to his parents, and now he was gone. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "It was a trap. You were right. And I walked into it anyway and got Sirius killed." "Voldemort killed Sirius," Hermione corrected firmly. "He orchestrated this. He manipulated you. The blame is his, not yours." Summer brought change to Slytherin House's dynamics. The war was public now. Families had to choose sides openly. Some pureblood families declared support for Voldemort. The Malfoys, Parkinsons, Knots, distant relatives. Others stayed neutral or quietly opposed him. Theodore's father declared for Voldemort. Theodore himself refused. "I'm not following my father into madness," he told Hermione on the train home. "He's chosen blood purity over reason. I'm choosing differently." "That takes courage," Hermione said. "It's not courage. It's logic. You've proven blood status is irrelevant. I'd be an idiot to ignore evidence because it conflicts with tradition." Daphne's family remained neutral, refusing to declare either way. It was a dangerous position, satisfying no one. "My parents are scared," Daphne admitted. "They supported the Dark Lord last time but regret it now. But publicly opposing him means becoming targets." The war had forced everyone to show their true positions. There was no more pretending, no more neutrality. Hermione spent the summer with her parents, who'd taken her warnings seriously and implemented Muggle security measures. They'd moved to a new house, changed their names on official documents, prepared to disappear, if necessary. "We're taking this seriously," her father said. "Your safety is our priority." Hermione felt grateful and guilty in equal measure. Her presence endangered them. But she couldn't abandon the magical world, couldn't hide while others fought. 6th year, Death Eaters and Horcruxes. 6th year brought Slughorn as Potions Master and devastating news. Snape had killed Dumbledore. Hermione heard the story from other students. Snape fleeing with Draco Malfoy, Dumbledore dead on the astronomy tower, Death Eaters invading the school. Her head of house, the professor who'd protected her for 5 years, had murdered the headmaster. The Slytherin reaction was divided. Some celebrated. Snape had proven his loyalty to the Dark Lord. Others were horrified. A few were confused. Hermione was devastated. Snape had been harsh, demanding, often cold, but he'd also protected her, acknowledged her abilities, never let other Slytherins destroy her completely. She trusted him. And he'd been a Death Eater all along. I don't believe it, Theodore said stubbornly. Snape hated the Dark Lord. I heard him arguing with my father about blood purity once. This doesn't make sense. Maybe he was playing both sides, Daphne suggested. Maybe he was always loyal to Voldemort but pretending to serve Dumbledore. Hermione didn't know what to believe. The evidence suggested Snape had murdered Dumbledore in cold blood, but something felt wrong about the narrative. She approached Harry, who'd witnessed the murder. Tell me exactly what happened, she demanded. Harry recounted Dumbledore's death, Snape's killing curse, Draco's inability to commit murder. He also mentioned something Dumbledore had told him. There were Horcruxes, pieces of Voldemort's soul hidden in objects, and they had to be destroyed for Voldemort to be killed. How many Horcruxes? Hermione asked, mind already racing through possibilities. Dumbledore thought 7, including the part of soul still in Voldemort's body. We've destroyed 2, Tom Riddle's diary and a ring. 5 remain. Then we find them, Hermione said immediately. We research, we hunt, we destroy them. It's the only way to end this. Harry looked at her. You don't have to do this. You could stay safe. I'm Muggle-born, Harry. There's no safety for me while Voldemort lives. And you're my friend. I don't abandon my friends when they face impossible odds. They spent the remainder of 6th year researching Horcruxes. Hermione dove into the darkest texts in the library, reading about soul-splitting magic with clinical detachment. She identified potential Horcrux locations based on Voldemort's history and psychology. He'd choose objects with significant meaning, she theorized, connected to Hogwarts founders, to his heritage, to power. We're looking for artifacts. Her Slytherin housemates noticed her obsessive research. Some assumed she was studying dark magic to join the Death Eaters. Others suspected she was working against Voldemort. You're planning something, Daphne said. Something dangerous. I'm planning to survive, Hermione replied. Want to help? Daphne hesitated. Then, yes. What do you need? Information about pure-blood families. Objects they might possess with dark magic. Anything connected to Voldemort or the Founders. Daphne became Hermione's researcher for pure-blood family histories. Theodore contributed knowledge about dark artifacts. Blaise offered connections to families who might have information. A resistance was forming within Slytherin House itself. Small, tentative, but real. Students who'd questioned blood purity for years were now willing to actively oppose it. The school year ended with Voldemort's control expanding. The Ministry had fallen to his supporters. Muggleborns were being rounded up. The Hogwarts curriculum would be controlled by Death Eaters next year. Don't come back, Hermione's parents begged. Stay with us. Stay safe. I can't, Hermione said. Harry needs help destroying the Horcruxes, and if I hide, I'm admitting Voldemort wins. I'm admitting blood purity is right. You could die. I could. But I'd rather die fighting than live hiding. 7th year, the hunt and the battle. 7th year didn't happen at Hogwarts. Hermione joined Harry and Ron hunting Horcruxes, months camping in wilderness, researching, planning raids on heavily defended locations. Her Slytherin skills proved invaluable. She planned strategies, identified weaknesses in Death Eater defenses, used cunning rather than direct confrontation. When they infiltrated the Ministry to steal a Horcrux locket from Umbridge, Hermione's careful planning and strategic thinking made success possible. When they broke into Gringotts to steal Hufflepuff's cup from the Lestrange vault, Hermione's knowledge of pure-blood family politics helped them navigate the deceptions. The locket Horcrux tormented each of them with their worst fears. For Harry it was failure and his parents' disappointment. For Ron, it was being overshadowed and inadequate. For Hermione, it was different. You're not a real Slytherin. You're a mudblood pretending to belong. They all hate you. They've always hated you. You'll die alone and unmourned. Shut up, Hermione said to the locket. I know what I am. I don't need validation from a piece of Voldemort's soul. Ron destroyed the locket Horcrux with Gryffindor's sword. 3 down, 4 to go. They learned about the Deathly Hallows, the Elder Wand, Resurrection Stone, and Invisibility Cloak, objects that supposedly made one Master of Death. Voldemort was hunting the Elder Wand, believing it would make him invincible. He's wrong, Hermione said. Power isn't about artifacts. It's about choices, strategy, allies. We beat him through intelligence, not through magical weapons. The final Horcruxes were the cup, stolen from Gringotts, the diadem hidden at Hogwarts, Nagini the snake, always with Voldemort, and horrifyingly, Harry himself. Hermione had suspected for months that Harry was a Horcrux. The evidence was overwhelming. His scar connection to Voldemort, the Parseltongue ability, the way he'd shared Voldemort's thoughts. You have to die, she told him, voice breaking. To destroy the Horcrux in you, you have to let Voldemort kill you. I know, Harry said quietly. I've known for a while. The Battle of Hogwarts was chaos. Voldemort's forces attacked the school. The Order of the Phoenix defended. Students fought alongside professors in desperate defense. Hermione fought with every spell she knew, every strategic trick she'd learned. She targeted Death Eaters with precision, disabled rather than killed when possible, used environment and positioning instead of raw power. She encountered Draco Malfoy during the battle. He was unarmed, separated from his allies, looking terrified. Hermione, he said, recognizing her. Please, get out of the castle, she said curtly. Leave. Don't come back until this is over. Why are you helping me? Because despite everything, you're still a student, still a person. Go. Draco fled. Hermione continued fighting. When Harry walked into the Forbidden Forest to let Voldemort kill him, Hermione wanted to stop him. But she understood the logic. The Horcrux had to be destroyed. Harry's sacrifice was strategic, necessary. She watched him go and felt her heart break. But Harry survived. The Horcrux was destroyed, but Harry's willingness to die activated protections Voldemort couldn't understand. He woke in the forest and returned to fight. The final battle saw Voldemort defeated, not by power, but by knowledge. Harry explained the Elder Wand's allegiance, explained that Voldemort had never been its true master. When Voldemort tried to kill Harry with the Elder Wand, the spell rebounded and destroyed him. In the aftermath, Hermione stood in the ruined Great Hall surrounded by the dead and injured. Fred Weasley dead. Remus Lupin and Tonks dead. 50 others dead. But they'd won. Voldemort was destroyed. The war was over. Theodore Nott found her in the wreckage. We survived, he said, sounding surprised. Some of us did, Hermione replied, looking at the bodies being arranged respectfully. You were right, Theodore said, about blood purity being nonsense, about fighting being necessary, about everything. I wish I'd been wrong, Hermione said tiredly. I wish blood purity had been right and I'd been safely excluded from the magical world. This would have been easier. But you wouldn't have been you, Daphne added, joining them. You'd have been safe, but diminished. You chose difficulty over safety. That's the most Slytherin thing I've ever seen. Hermione looked at her two Slytherin allies. Friends, really, though she'd never quite admitted it before. We need to rebuild, she said. Not just the castle. Slytherin House. The whole system. This can't happen again. How do we rebuild Slytherin? Theodore asked. By proving it can produce heroes, Hermione said firmly. By showing that ambition and cunning can serve good purposes. By being better than what came before. Elogue, 19 years later, Hermione Granger stood on platform 9 3/4, watching her daughter Rose prepare to board the Hogwarts Express. Beside her was Ron. They'd married 3 years after the war. After Hermione had completed advanced studies in magical law, and Ron had joined the Auror department. Nervous? Ron asked their daughter. A bit, Rose admitted. What if I'm sorted into Slytherin like Mum? Hermione knelt to Rose's level. Then you'll have a chance to show them that Slytherin can be a house of heroes. That cunning and ambition can change the world for good, just like I did. Were you scared when you were sorted? But also determined. I knew I'd have to fight harder, prove more, be better than anyone expected. And I was. You will be too, whatever house you're sorted into. Nearby, Harry stood with Ginny and their children. Albus Severus Potter looked nervous about his own sorting. Don't worry about houses, Hermione called to him. Houses are just different paths to the same destination. What matters is who you choose to be, not where you're sorted. On the train, Rose found a compartment with Albus and Scorpius Malfoy, Draco's son, who'd been raised very differently from his father. The three children talked animatedly about Hogwarts, about magic, about possibilities. Hermione watched the train depart and felt Ron's arm around her shoulders. You changed everything, Ron said quietly. Changed Slytherin House, changed how people think about blood status, changed the whole system. I survived, Hermione corrected, and refused to let survival be enough. But Ron, I couldn't have done it alone. You, Harry, Theodore, Daphne, everyone who believed blood purity was wrong and was willing to fight for something better. After the war, Hermione had done exactly what she'd promised, rebuilt. She'd worked with Professor McGonagall, now headmistress, to reform Slytherin House. They'd removed the blood purity rhetoric from house culture, emphasized that ambition and cunning were tools, not identities. She'd become Minister of Magic at 35, the youngest in history, had pushed through legislation outlawing blood status discrimination, had ensured Muggleborns had equal access to magical education and career opportunities. Slytherin House had changed too. It still valued ambition and cunning, but it had learned those values could serve justice as easily as tyranny. Students sorted into Slytherin now included Muggleborns regularly, not just accepted reluctantly, but celebrated. Do you ever regret it? Ron asked as they left the platform. Being sorted into Slytherin instead of Gryffindor? Your life would have been easier. Hermione considered the question honestly. Easier, yes. She'd have had friends immediately, have avoided years of hostility and isolation, have been accepted instead of constantly proving herself. But she also would have been different. Softer, perhaps. Less strategic. Less prepared for the complex political battles she'd fought as minister. Less able to understand how dark wizards thought, which had proven invaluable during the war. I don't regret it, she said finally. The Sorting Hat put me exactly where I needed to be. Slytherin taught me things Gryffindor never could. It made me who I am. Not despite the difficulty, but because of it. You proved that Slytherin could be good, Ron said. I proved that houses don't define morality, Hermione corrected. That Slytherin values, ambition, cunning, resourcefulness, can serve any purpose we choose. Dark wizards used those values for evil. I used them for justice. Same tools, different application. They walked through King's Cross, just another couple in a crowd. Though Hermione knew people recognized her, the Muggle-born Slytherin, who'd helped defeat Voldemort. The Minister of Magic who'd reformed the system from within. But before all that, before the titles and recognition, she'd been an 11-year-old girl sorted into a house that didn't want her. A girl who'd chosen to fight rather than flee, to prove rather than surrender, to change the system rather than accept it. That girl had become Hermione Granger, Slytherin, and Slytherin had become something better because she'd been sorted there. The Sorting Hat had known exactly what it was doing that September night in 1991. It had seen a brilliant, ambitious, cunning girl who would challenge every assumption about blood purity and house identity. It had seen someone who could change Slytherin from within. It had seen Hermione Granger, and it had made the right choice. Not the easy choice. Not the comfortable choice. But the right one. Because sometimes the most important battles aren't won through Gryffindor courage or Ravenclaw wisdom or Hufflepuff loyalty. Sometimes they're won through Slytherin cunning, through strategic thinking, long-term planning, and the ambition to change the world even when the world doesn't want to change. Hermione had been that kind of Slytherin. The kind who proved that ambition could serve justice, that cunning could defeat tyranny, that resourcefulness could protect the vulnerable. She'd been the mudblood Slytherin who'd forced an entire house to confront its prejudices and become better. And in doing so, she'd shown that houses were just the beginning of who you could become, not the end. The Sorting Hat had sorted her into Slytherin, and Slytherin had never been the same.